For more on this, I'm joined from Herzliya by Middle East correspondent and author Jotam Confino. Jotam, great to have you on the show. So Netanyahu has clashed with army chief over this Gaza plan. What dangers does this reported rift between the Israeli army and Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government pose?
Well, I would say in a worst-case scenario, the IDF chief would resign. That would be a huge scandal, really, because he is the leader of the military. It would also have a trickle-down effect on other senior members, probably in the military, who could likely follow suit. It could also inspire soldiers not to participate in this occupation of Gaza. So really, if it really comes to a worst-case scenario where the IDF chief resigns because he believes that what Netanyahu and the government are doing is in violation of international law, that could have a huge repercussions for the military. But also, I would say this rift between Netanyahu and some of the far-right ministers, and then, of course, the senior military leadership, it also reflects the rift inside the Israeli public, because there are many, many people who oppose the annexation and the occupation of Gaza. Roughly half of Israelis, at least half of Israelis, oppose this, while the other half are, some of them, supportive of this, and others maybe don't really know where they stand. But this is definitely a really serious problem to have inside the leadership, having the IDF chief and the prime minister going head-to-head on such a crucial issue.
And Jotam, what are the practical implications of the Israeli army fully occupying Gaza? And what consequences could this military operation have, especially as the UN warns the plan is deeply alarming ahead of tomorrow's government vote?
Well, let's start with the implications for the hostages. That is one of the reasons why the IDF chief does not want to go ahead with this, because he believes that it's going to pose a danger for the hostages. First of all, because Hamas and other terror groups could start killing the hostages, as they did last year when they see that the Israeli military are coming close to where they are, but they could also be killed by IDF in mistakes. So that is a huge implication of starting to occupy Gaza. But then you have, of course, all the other repercussions. This means that Israel will going to have to probably have tens of thousands of soldiers stationed permanently inside Gaza, which will mean that a lot of them will be killed. That's something that the IDF chief reported. He also told Netanyahu that several soldiers could be killed in the beginning of this land grab. And of course, it also means that Israel is going to de facto have responsibility for more than 2 million Palestinian civilians. They will have to make sure that they have food, water, electricity, everything that has to do with infrastructure, essentially running their lives. That would be up to Israel. So it's a huge undertaking, and something that, of course, could last years depending on the next government and if they want to continue following the suit of this government.
And the UN has reported that nearly 90% of aid trucks entering Gaza since mid-May have been looted. What does this mean for the humanitarian crisis on the ground, Jotam? And how are these aid agencies now planning to respond to something like this?
It's a disaster, but we've seen this from day one. We've seen trucks with aid being looted by gangs, definitely also by terror groups. And this is really, it has huge repercussions for the civilians in Gaza, because a lot of aid is actually entering Gaza. Nearly 2 million tons of aid entered Gaza since October the 7th. But as you just mentioned here, from May 19th until now, that's the most recent data on this looting of aid, 90% of aid was looted. That means that hungry kids and civilians in general are not getting the aid that they need. And as for the UN, what they plan to do with this, look, they don't have an answer. They refuse to have IDF or the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation escorting the trucks, making sure that they're not looted. They refuse to have that. So what is the option, really? It is a disaster, because at the end of the day, it means that the civilians in Gaza are not getting the aid that's entering Gaza every single day.
And we have heard today, Jotam, more than 20 Palestinians have been killed after an aid truck overturns. And that's according to health authorities in Gaza. And as we know, we've seen those pictures of malnutrition in children in Gaza and adults. But I just want to move on to another part of the story. The US Senator Bernie Sanders said billions of taxpayer dollars are being spent on a policy which is starving little kids. His comments came after Trump was questioned on Israel's campaign in Gaza. Right now, where does the US stand?
First of all, I think it's important to mention that Bernie Sanders' accusation is, I would say, far-fetched, because quite literally, millions of dollars of American taxpayers' money is going to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which feeds civilians in Gaza. So quite the opposite. But another thing, obviously, where does the United States stand? Because Bernie Sanders represents the Democrats and the left wing. But of course, Donald Trump is in power now. He looks at this very differently. I would say essentially Donald Trump has given Israel carte blanche to do pretty much whatever they want. The only thing he needs to make sure of is that civilians in Gaza don't continue to starve, or at least those who starve won't continue to starve. So he is continuing to pressure Israel into making sure that more aid enters, and also that the US will play a larger role in distributing aid going forward. This is pretty much the only issue where Donald Trump is holding Israel accountable, but anything else, ranging from occupation to military operations to ceasefire negotiations, he's kind of letting Netanyahu pretty much do whatever he wants.
Jotam Confino, thank you for joining us and for your insights and analysis as always.